All right. Well, we're going to jump in, guys. And this morning, I actually wanted to start. We have a lot to get through, and we're going to talk about numbers, and we're going to interview an agent, and we're going to share some 5 tactics that we've been talking about, but just not getting to over the last few weeks. 5 tactics to continue to see our businesses thrive. But before I did, I thought it appropriate to just come together as an organization, brokerages that span the state of Oregon, and just talk about where the world is, and really just what's going on in right in the country, and in our cities and our towns. And I don't want to spend too much of the call on it, but I just wanted to come out to the group and say that every one of our brokerages is actively looking at ways to not just talk, but to do. And I think it's really important right now that that we make that differentiation. That tragedy has happened many times in this country, and there's no way to put one tragic event ahead of another or as more tragic as another, because to the people involved, to the families involved, to the communities involved, if it hits them at that moment personally, it is the most tragic. But what is both heart-wrenching and beautiful at the same time to see is a group of humans and a country and cities potentially finally, right, stopping and saying, hey, something has to be done. Not something has to be said, not something has to be posted, but something has to be done. I hope that all of you received the email from Gary Keller this week that I thought, right there, it couldn't be said better. I wanted to just read a couple sections of that. Some may have not gotten that email, some right may not have read it, but he said this, put simply, just 2 sentences early on in that letter. He said, to our Black, Keller Williams associates and clients, we are with you. You matter. Your family, friends, and community matter. Your lives matter. You are in our hearts and our prayers. He continued and said, the truth is that racial injustice and equality persists. Now, those 2 things are different words, guys, and different potentially completely different issues: racial injustice and inequality. And yet we find ourselves living in a community, in a city, in a country, in a time, in a world where both of those persist. And it doesn't matter what race or what background or what thought or what religion or what, right, whatever begins to separate people, that will persist, right? It has persisted. He said this, and in order to help change that, it's crucial to not only say something about it, but to do something about it. I believe that the real estate community has a unique opportunity to promote healing and reform, is what he wrote. And the first step is reflection and thoughtful self-examination. Right? The first step isn't voicing an opinion. The first step isn't crying out. The first step is reflection and thoughtful self-examination. Then we listen, we learn, we speak up. That's how change happens. And then he said, we know many of you are past this stage, and from you, we need your leadership. And so he goes on to say that the company would immediately start a task force at the International Associate Leadership Council. We have already gone into every single one of our offices in the state of Oregon and reached out to people who would like to be on that task force, and on the local level, as well as the regional level, as well as the national level, to sort of lead that conversation. as well. Leadership here has already engaged with a couple of consulting firms, and we will be hosting really some consulting and training and conversation amongst our brokerages that everybody will be invited to around around inequality, around racial injustice as well. But we will get into action and activity as opposed to just email and comments and statements. And I think that that is, for me, what's really important, right? I think it's not a time to say, well, gosh, I know how this person feels or that person feels, because honestly, it doesn't matter who we are, what we've experienced, where we come from. We don't, right? We don't. Like, I don't know how one person feels or the second person feels. I can have empathy, but I don't really know how someone feels. Just like no one really knows how I feel about certain things. And I just want us to have that conversation openly, be willing to have that conversation. He ended his letter by saying this. He said, we can all do something. Lead a conversation in your market center. Commit as a family to create change. I know that each of our market centers have had certain individuals go out and lead that as well, right? Perhaps it's by joining groups, right, that are standing up or laying down in public places. There was a group here in Portland that said, well, gosh, what we can do is support our city and support our people, and actually perhaps support those that are marching by going afterwards behind them and cleaning up the city. And there was a group of agents from Barnes Road that did that yesterday, which made me feel amazing, to be honest, that we have a group of individuals that are willing to take action and do. Gary said this: reach out to your local real estate board, make sure that racial equality is reflected in their positions, ask if they support initiatives and measures crucial to racial and social justice, then get involved in those that you believe in. Now is also the time to check in on each other. And I think this is the most important point of the message to me. Now is also the time to check in on each other, speak our truths, listen with an empathetic ear. While we may not be able to come together in person, we can make a difference, call, video chat, text, support each other during this unbelievably challenging time. Last sentence: take heart and take care of each other. While pain and hate brought us to this moment, love will help us find our way out. Onward, Gary Keller. I know that message got posted many, many times on Facebook and was shared with a lot of people. But I think it's important. I think it's important to be led by an organization that that is willing to make a message or to write a message like that, but then immediately jump in and mobilize people to help in the initiative and reach out to agents that could be a voice around the initiative as well. And all of that has happened in hours and the last few days. So I just wanted to share that with the group. This last week, I sent a message to our team and really it's for our brokerages as well. And I'll just share one more thing on this topic, but I think it's incredibly relevant. I was actually doing research not for the situation we find ourselves in, not for this event that just transposed, but I was doing some research for a class, actually, a real estate class on becoming a better CEO. And I had been researching some early CEOs, right? Some that are no longer even living, and what did they do? Like, what did they implement in their businesses and what strategies did they lead with? And I always say that I'm a firm believer that we can learn from the past, and then that past, if we learn appropriately, it allows us to reinvent our future, right? And that works in business, it works in just humanity. So I had been reading about the Toyota founder, Sakichi Toyoda, and Sakichi, I wrote in my post this week, was credited for pioneering the concept of jidoka in the early 1900s. And that really was a pillar of all manufacturing. Actually, today was the basis of this concept, jidoka, which TPS is the Toyota production system that actually almost every manufacturing plant now uses. Now, jidoka was ultimately this concept, guys, and this is relevant for our conversation as we're having it now, but it's also relevant in our business. Jidoka was this belief that at any time, if quality decreases, well, all work should stop. I'm going to say that again. Jidoka, the Japanese concept of jidoka says, if quality decreases, all work should stop. Why doesn't it? Why isn't that in every business? Why isn't that in every? Well, because we get caught up in what our goal is. Maybe we get caught up in the financial, right, the ramifications of stopping work. We get caught up in, right, our regular day to day. On the assembly line there in Japan, Toyota realized that even a small problem, if left unaddressed, would create some major problems and complications of the product later, right? Think about it, like lives were at stake there. If there were complications or problems with car parts later on, we see what happens when quality control isn't focused on. Put simply, little things matter. By actual definition, that word jidoka means automation with a human touch. Automation with a human touch. And so as I was researching that, guys, and then this most recent event happened in Minneapolis, I couldn't help but think that first the question, how do we get here, right? How does something like this happen? And again and again and again and again. And it's because we've lost the human touch. It's because life has become automated and our thought process has become automated and our reactions have become automated and we've lost the human touch. Now, there are so many business lessons with that definition, automation with a human touch, right? Especially in our industry that's getting disrupted. And we believe here at Keller Williams that, yes, real estate is continuing to be disrupted. Gary Keller talked about that just yesterday and talked about the situation yesterday with Inman, which I appreciated, but he talked about disruption, but with a human touch. So one of the simplest and most well-known demonstrations of that philosophy of Toyota was the andon cord. And there on your screen, you see what that andon cord looked like. In Japanese manufacturing, the andon cord was produced or introduced in the early 1900s. And it was just that. It was literally a simple cord. It's gotten more technologically advanced. Right now they use buttons, but it was a cord that hung above that manufacturing line, guys. It was just a simple rope. And if pulled, the entire manufacturing line would stop, right? All work would stop, all production would stop. Now, the takeaway here and the important message for us is this, that anybody could pull that cord. That cord wasn't for the manager to pull or the engineer to pull or the shift overseer to pull. It was for anybody that saw anything wrong to pull, right? If they saw anything wrong with the product that they were producing, they could pull that cord. And all hands on deck would go to the person that pulled the cord and figure out, hey, what's the problem? What did you see? And how do we fix it now? Not how do we fix it in tomorrow's production? How do we fix it if it comes back as a recall? Like right now, we need a recall, guys. And that's because we just haven't pulled the cord when we saw something wrong, right? What I love about that is every single person had the power and authority to pull the cord. Right? If you see something wrong with something that matters, also knowing the small things matter, we need to pull the cord. We need to speak up. We need to focus on delivering quality. We need to, right? Life is, our brokerage mission is built around making sure that life is experiential. And I don't think anyone feels that it super is right now. And so what needs to happen is we need to pull that cord, right? We need to pull the cord and do something, not just say, hey, something's wrong over here, but the group collectively gets together and figures it out. And although I started that research before any of this showed up, I just thought, well, how perfectly matched is that concept with what potentially the human race needs right now. And oftentimes we just get too busy. You know, I think I really was, and I mentioned it earlier, I was really touched by seeing some of our agents show up downtown and just send some pictures to our Facebook group, because guess what? They could have been working yesterday. They could have been making money yesterday. They could have been needing to service clients yesterday, but a group pulled the cord and said, you know what, this is important right now, because this is one step in the solution right now for our city, for our community, for the people that we're supporting by doing that. And guys, what we need to understand is many of us have varying degrees of opinions. We see people affected in different ways. We see people affected by the inequality. We see loved ones or family members, or maybe even ourselves, affected by vandalism and destruction of property. And by voicing an opinion, we have to be careful that we don't then take our opinion and attack someone else's, because in and of itself, that's the problem too. So I'm going to wrap it up. But I think that this picture of pulling the cord and thinking back what the purpose was for that is good for us to reflect on, right? Gary says that that's the first step, is self-reflection and thought around when it's time to pull the cord, and that time has come, right? When we stop, right, find purpose in that pause, find solutions in that pause, find peace in that pause, find experience in that pause, right? Find a way to help others in that pause. It's really important. And I just want you to know, as a brokerage, as a community, as a company, as a network of families, you will see activity and not just voice, and not just email, and not just Facebook or Twitter or Instagram or social. And I think it's important for all of us to do that. Cool. All right. Thank you for allowing me to spend some time on that. We're gonna talk a little bit about numbers. It almost feels inconsequential, but I think you know, normalcy in what we do as well is important. So let's just reflect briefly. This week, I got the right graph as I go through it. I apologize for a couple of weeks ago when I had the wrong one, but in front of you is the numbers this week over week, right? What did last week look like from the week before? And granted, these are very, very small snapshots. We collect these, right? And hopefully each of you are using them for weekly conversations, but there's some interesting numbers that show up. Lots of green, obviously, right? And increases. When you look at our new listings, Portland was up 22% week over week. Eugene up 36%. Salem, thank goodness, up 71%. Corvallis was up 82%. The only market that we didn't see an increase in listings week over week was Southern Oregon, which continues to be incredibly tight. Pendings, Portland was up 10%, right? Eugene up 3%. Salem up 27%. Corvallis up 30%. We'll get these, are the numbers blurry? We'll get these out to you so you can see them unblurred. But actually, as important as looking at those percentages, guys, I want you to look at the actual numbers for just a minute. When you look at Portland, right? Portland saw 873 new listings, right? Portland Metro, but saw 855 pendings. Eugene saw 147 new listings, 157 pendings, right? Salem, 110 new listings, 241 pendings. Corvallis, 124 listings, 103 pendings. Southern Oregon, 139 listings, 237 pendings. That's a story of the week, guys, right? We continue to pend product faster in most cases than we can even create it, which ultimately is a conversation of where future values are going. I mean, that's what our clients need us to, right? Need us to do. Maybe if I make it bigger, guys, sorry. Not sure if that makes it any better, but our clients need us to be able to provide them with an opinion of where, perfect, thanks Andrea, where the market is going. Remember, fear around real estate is financial. It's financial fear. If I buy today, will the value of this home be lower in a week, in 2 weeks, in 2 months, in 2 years? And the fact is, we never know exactly what's going to happen, but sharing with them the new listings and then the pendings, guys, it doesn't matter what market you're in, you have almost the entire state of Oregon here. Sharing those numbers as a state and then locally will be incredibly helpful. When you look at some price changes, interestingly enough, we saw some price change increases, right? And that largely may be based on new listings as well. As new listings go up, people that are sitting on the market that for some reason haven't sold, and let's be honest, if you haven't sold, there might be a reason with your price because everything else is pending. We begin to see those price changes take effect as well. So that's a good conversation. If you have listings, right? Maybe you do have listing inventory and maybe some of those listings are sitting, share with them those price changes and understand that if you believe they need to do a price change and they haven't, right? Sharing with them that gosh, if they're in Eugene and you haven't sold your listing, well, sharing with them that price changes were up 54%, that means other people got the news flash, right? Other people got the memo that it's time to make a price change. And you might share with them that, gosh, and we saw 36% more listings week over week. So maybe more competition is coming on, right? Maybe it's a condition and price conversation. If they're not willing to change the condition, they may need to change the price. And I think that that's probably what you're seeing happen with those increases in prices. And look at the solds. We talked last week, 2 weeks ago, I suppose, because last week was Dave Jenks, who was awesome. But 2 weeks ago, we talked about that sold number. And now we're week over week. That's a big number week over week, right? A number of solds. But remember, that activity was us waking up. That activity wasn't even, right, going back 45 days. It wasn't that we had figured out COVID, or it wasn't that, gosh, well, the whole city opened up, so now we could do work. No, that's just us working. That's just us figuring out, and we're going to talk to John Powers in just a minute around open houses, but that's just us figuring out, well, how do we put deals together? And week over week, right, from 45 days ago, our activity changed the week before. We saw increase in closings and sold properties up 40% week over week across every single market except Southern Oregon, which is up 20%. And the only reason why you're not up 40 is because you just don't have enough sellers to sell and increase by 40%, right? So it's still a listing challenge in your marketplace for sure. So just some good numbers to look at and some data that we can use to form conversations. But I would absolutely be using the actual number of new listings and the actual number of pendings, and then be using the increase, the percentage of increase in price changes if I have a seller that needs one. So I think these data points give us some really clear opportunities to have conversations today. Cool? All right, we're going to shift gears here and we're gonna talk with actually John Powers. John, are you on the call?
I am.
All right, so I'm gonna stop the share and just really have a conversation. I was asked to bring someone on like John, actually. Otherwise, I wouldn't. I talk to John enough every day. I don't need to talk to him again on Wednesday morning. But I was asked to interview John around what he has been doing for for open houses over the last 30 to 60 days, and then what is he doing right now as some of the markets and some of the counties begin to open up. As frame of reference for those of you that don't know John actually leads the team in Portland that I started and have really all but stepped out of to really have John lead that. So when you see anything show up from PDX Property Group, truly it's not me. It is John Powers. He leads a pretty small and lean team. Maybe John, just tell us a little bit about the team, and then we're going to dive right into what's happening in the marketplace for you guys.
Yeah, so just for reference, size of team, we have 8 agents that are in production. What that looks like right now is we just actually did our closed and pended at just over 1.2 million in volume so far year to date. We've closed and pended about 100 units, and all through about 8 agents. So our agents on average just are on pace for around just over 10 million per agent, which is important to us, right? We always look at per agent productivity in our team and making sure that everybody's making good income. And so that average is something we're proud of, is just a little bit over 10, and actually we're starting to get closer to about a 10 million average per agent.
Awesome. And that 1.2, and you said 1.2 in volume, you meant 1.2 million in GCI.
Correct. Sorry. Yeah. GCI volume. That would be a horrible year.
So
for our team.
And let's just talk post-COVID. Let's just talk last 60 days, right? March came, you're figuring things out. What does April and May look like for you? And we're going to talk about how most of that has shown up, obviously, through your opens. But what does that look like in terms of what did you pend, or what can you share about the last 60 days?
Yeah, I wanted to include our March numbers as well because they look bigger, but of course, adding another month. But that was truly those March numbers were actually the reason why we don't really want to necessarily share them now, is because those were actually activities that we had done prior to COVID, right? So really just looking at April and May, we have pended just over 50 units between April and May as a team. We've taken 24 listings. We've hosted 39 virtual open houses in that time period. Closed volume, just about 17.5 million in closed volume in those 2 months, and just about 438,000 in GCI in those 2 months.
Okay. Closed. So you have stayed busy with those 8 agents, obviously all in production. How did you? I missed that, it blipped out, but how many virtual open homes? Do you know how many virtual open houses you've held since COVID started?
39 virtual open houses.
So 39 open houses. Would that be more or typical if you weren't doing them virtually? What do you think you typically do in a month?
I'd say that's slightly above average, if I'm being really honest. Yeah, it's slightly above. We were able to, just because of the virtual nature, we were able to stack multiple virtual open houses in a day for some of our people. So that's probably slightly above average in terms of our activity, which is awesome to see.
Yep. My thought there, and the reason why I asked that question, is because in times of challenge, new opportunity shows up, and the level of activity has been able to be increased when you look at, if you're tracking how many opens you have and how many leads get added to the database. Do you have any metrics on that? What have been the results of those virtual opens? And not just guess, but how many leads or people have you been able to add to the database that you're able to now follow up with and connect with?
Yeah, so we were big into lead capture, so I definitely have the numbers there, and then we actually experimented with 2 weeks without doing lead capture. So that's where, but actually tracked leads that have come in as a result of our open houses was 62. Okay. And then there were some unique visitors outside of that people kind of come and go. Interesting. Sometimes the lead capture was literally somebody logging in for about 5 seconds, realizing that their camera's on and they were in their robe, and then they bailed out. But it was at least a lead capture that we were able to follow up with. So it's not like.
Yep.
What's that?
I said you might want to put a disclosure on those virtual opens.
We actually ended up selling a house to somebody in a bathrobe. So as a result of those leads, we had 5 pendings as a team specifically out of our virtual open houses, and 2 of our listings were double-ended as a result of the virtual open house, where we met the client in the virtual open house and ended up writing the offer with that client.
Okay. So, so one of my takeaways, guys, is this. So 60 days of virtual open, 62 people added to the database. Interestingly enough, you were able to stay on what our MREA model, right? Model built team is built on, is adding people to the database, even though you weren't able to meet face to face, top of funnel, while the database was being cultivated a couple of weeks ago. In fact, last 3 weeks, we talked to some phenomenal database-driven agents, right? People that are winning with the database and building relationships. And I always say that as important as that is, and it is the most important thing in our business, top of funnel is important as well. So while all of that was happening, while the database and past clients and current clients were being curated and cultivated and nurtured, you were able to at least have a stream of top of funnel, which actually was adding more than one person a day to that database. So let me ask you this, and we're going to get into I want to ask you some questions about your perspective as things begin to open. But what were the biggest challenges? Let me ask you this first. Do you plan on continuing virtual opens, or when will that stop? Will it stop when the city's completely open, when we get on the other side of this, or what is your perspective right now?
I think virtual open houses are a new normal for our team. I think the first ones were bumpy and rough, and right, like if there was a reason why we didn't do 50 or 60 virtuals and only 39, it was because in the beginning the struggle was to, we weren't getting guests and traffic. So, and we'll talk a little bit about that in the challenges. But yeah, so they will continue. We just listed 2 properties this week that have tenants occupying them and we can't get in. They're amazing deals, so we're going to still hold those open virtually. We're going to pick and choose some other open houses there. But my perspective is that we're all getting, in general public, are getting sick of Zoom. Like I've stopped, literally people are like, hey, let's jump on a Zoom. And I'm like, can we just go back to a phone call? I just don't want to be in front of your face anymore. No offense. It's just a lot of that, right? So, so I think that there's going to be there's like this stretch of Zoom, right, and digital. And I think that when we're opening up, people are going to say, hey, like it would be nice to get back into a physical sense a bit. And then after that, it'll die back down and we'll still continue to do virtual. So I expect a little bit of an ebb and flow of virtuals, but we will always continue to keep virtuals as a strategy, especially for tenant occupied, multifamily, stuff like that. Did I freeze?
No, I think it's Chris that froze. John, keep rolling.
All right, I'm going to keep rolling. Let's see here. Chris was asking a little bit about challenges, right? And so early on in the virtual open house experience, the challenges were absolutely, like I mentioned a little bit earlier, was traffic. Right? I think we were shut down, or like I think the following week of shelter in place or stay at home orders, we started virtual open houses, and they're really bumpy. Honestly, we're kind of a team that just gets into action and we'll figure it out, right? So the biggest obstacles up front were absolutely, how do I get traffic there when the MLS, when RMLS shuts down open house advertising links? Zillow was removing third-party links. They weren't advertising them at that point. So we were really forced, because we were always used to doing things the old way that we had done them. And then we thought, gosh, we need to start really innovating and doing things differently. So that was our first challenge. How do we get traffic? How do we market our open houses? The second challenge was quite frankly, like, how do we actually even present? Like, how like when we're on stage and show up, how do we actually present to the public that's in an engaging way? What are our tools and resources that we have available to the consumers? Like, what does during the open house look like? So that was another challenge we faced. And we have, guys, for anybody here, and we've posted this before, but happy to do it. We have our entire virtual open house system that's laid out, and happy to share that with Leslie here so she can get that out if it hasn't been out already. But we've documented everything, exactly how we market them, what we're requiring our agents to do. See, that's what we found. And actually probably my biggest aha in terms of the marketing piece was that we had to get our sellers involved in the marketing of their properties. And that was actually right. We fear that because we think, well, gosh, that's our job as realtors. But we had to innovate because the channels that we were advertising in are largely made up of other realtors, right? Not that general public as much. And so when we started enlisting the help of our sellers through their Nextdoor apps, through their Facebook channels, through their community channels, we started to see a lot more engagement. And the sellers actually, like, they were bored too, like, hey, like they wanted to help. So it was actually created a really cool synergy in terms of marketing the home. And that's probably something we would take moving forward and we provided the sellers with a perfect advertising kit. Hey, go on here, download it. Like, we instructed everything for them. So we made it as easy as possible. But that's another thing that I think will continue is enlisting our help with some of our sellers and talking through that's okay.
Awesome. For some reason, my sound dropped, but I'm back. One question I saw in the chat, John, and maybe you answered this when I couldn't hear what you were saying. I just saw your mouth moving. But did you talk about how you captured the seller contact information?
Buyers coming through?
Yeah, the buyer's contact information.
Yeah. So we're big Cognito form users. In fact, we'll talk a little bit about that here in a little bit on physicals. But yeah, it was just a contact. It was a Cognito form that would, when they filled it out, would lead capture, would ask them a couple little questions, and then that would capture our lead, and then that would send them the link to our open house. So they had to fill out the lead form before they could get into the open.
So I want to transition. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, and what I'll send, it has our Cognito form. You guys can rip it off and duplicate everything. Cool.
Okay. Did you, while I couldn't hear you, did you go into next steps and now physical opens and what the strategy is? Okay. So let's go down that path now for the next 5 minutes or so. Obviously it showed back up in MLS, certain counties, right? We're different, but for those of you that are about to, or are thinking about going back to physical open houses, how we run those and execute those are going to be critically important. Walk us through what you have put together. I'm actually beginning this weekend.
Yeah, first and foremost, I just want to preface and say that this is something that I understand can be controversial. And I think that we need to understand that at a very high level when approaching our physical open houses. So what I'm saying right now is just my perspective from my team. Actually, like Chris said before, Chris doesn't even barely makes any decisions in the team any longer. So Chris is like, wow, you're doing physical open. So he does, like, this is not anything having to do with what the office is recommending, what anything like that. This is just my own personal perspective. So I just wanted to put that out there. So I have the first thing that, and I talked to my team today. So yes, we are starting to talk about to physical open houses, and our entire, and I will make sure that you guys also get our physical open house strategy and policies and procedures that we're looking to, and just know that, we're figuring this out, and there might be some additional overlays, but I want you guys to know that the entire system is based off of the Oregon Health Administration guidelines, Governor Kate Brown's COVID guidelines, our office showing policy guidelines for KWRP, as well as some additional team overlays, some things that are not necessarily required as a result of all of the the safe reopenings. We're actually adding more. And so first and foremost, I never want to put the brokerage in jeopardy, my team in jeopardy, my agents in jeopardy for not just health wise, but also financially and fines. So that's really the first approach, is that was where our head went, was what are all the policies? Where can we gather all of them? So what are ours going to be? And how are we going to then, now with all of these overlays and restrictions, now go into a physical environment? But that's first and foremost. And that would be my suggestion, is that we think of safety first and policies and rules first. And then from there, you can then figure out how you're going to do your open house. So that was first and foremost for us, was to get a clear understanding there in terms of the policies. But things you need to think about, in my opinion, are inside the open house versus outside the open house, right? My thought is that you're going to have some groups of people showing up, especially if you have a nice weather day or you have people right as they're reopening. So we need to think about, what does that look like outside of the home? What safety procedures are you putting in, right? I always look at it as like, if I go to new seasons, right, they have lines for them. They've got hand sanitizing station. They've got everything marked off 6 feet, right? They have one ways in and out for that. So that's exactly how our outside should look as well. When the consumer is face to the front of the open house, they're actually going to be confronted with a locked door, which is something interesting, right? And on that locked door is a notice, right? First and foremost, with the beginnings of our policies. Now, we also have some policy printouts that are going to be stationed for people that are gathering in line. Other thing to think about, do you have two team members per open house? Do you have somebody that's controlling outside lines and somebody that's controlling inside the home? So these are the things that we're thinking about, and creating some we have absolute rules you have to follow, and some are rather some suggestions that we're giving. So we're kind of giving some people 2 ways to think about that. So they're greeted with a sign at the front of the door that just says, hey, you need to text the agent on site, or we give a little bit.ly, a shortened URL for them to, which is just an access to our Cognito form. On our, again, Cognito forms are a way of life for us in lead capture. So Cognito forms for us, what they will get in response is a straight from Oregon Health Administration questions about how are they feeling? Do they have a fever, right? Like all of that is important. The other thing too is that we have to be able to track parties through our open house. So it is an absolute requirement that everybody fill out that form, sign in, tell who they are, right? Up front before we can even let them in. So there's a lot that goes on for stopping them. They need to fill out forms. They need to answer questions appropriately. Now we say, okay, look, we can only have one group through the open house at a time. And it can only, so we're then now taking this overlay for our showing instructions where it can only be the buyers that will appear on the contract that can actually be in the home. They have to be pre-approved, which, gosh, wouldn't that be amazing if like everybody that
on the Cognito form, John,
yeah,
they text you, or
they'll respond with a link,
or they'll go to that link. They'll fill out a Cognito form. It'll have their name, their email address. They'll answer some radial button questions that came from, right, the guidelines. They'll have to be pre-approved because that's a guideline as well, right? And once it says yes, the agent inside will get that text. Is that correct? And then they'll know that someone's there to come and see the home.
Correct.
We'll let them know in advance that they have 10 minutes, right? Each tour will be 10 minutes if there is someone else outside. And physically, for certain open houses, you will staff with 2 agents, one outside and one inside. And then your agents are bringing tape to tape off 6 feet and put X's on the floor, on the sidewalk, or in the driveway, should you end up with a group of people at that moment in time, correct? As it's their turn, they'll get to the front door, they'll go through that same process.
Correct.
And that keeps the client safe and your agent safe.
Correct.
While connecting you with their contact information, but also for state guidelines, you will have a way to contact them should you ever have to reach out to them if they were in contact with someone or potentially with someone that showed up at that open house. And
yeah,
the
authorities
contact information, because if they wind up sick, they need to let you know that too.
Correct. Yeah. So if the authorities come to us and say, hey, we need to see who's been through, we have that list, we can just provide it over. The beauty of this is that they have to be pre-approved to enter, and I'm guessing half of them won't. So what we do at that point is we make sure that our lender is available for a quick phone call, and they can do a quick pre-approval in 10 minutes while they're waiting in line. So we can still get them in the home.
Okay, cool. Now, last thing I'm going to ask you, or maybe say or share. Meanwhile, there is a large group of buyers that are not interested at all and will not begin going to physical open houses. So simultaneously, for each of these properties, you are still running virtual open houses, correct?
Yes. So that's another thing to think about. Do you have 2 physical agents on site with 1 virtual at home that's monitoring virtual processes in open house? Yeah. So we want to still be, so we're holding them together virtually and physically, just to give people, or if somebody visited and said, gosh, I'm not pre-approved and I'm not even able to, well, we want to say, hey, join the here, you can still get inside and see it just virtually.
Cool. Awesome. John, thank you for that. Guys, we know that's a lot, but we wanted to share two things. One, right, the tactics to do them virtually, but also as many of us are because we can, right? We're all independent contractors and we can, if it's legal, we can do it, right? And so as we knew that many of our agents are going to begin doing opens or heard that we've begun, I wanted to make sure that we're following certain protocols. So at the end of the day, we'll send out this system and this process to everybody so that you can sort of begin to check off your list of how you want to do it. Does it have to be done with all these digital platforms, incognito forms and text? No. However, if you're not going to do that, you're going to need to make sure that either one, you have two people at that open house, or two, you're following a protocol where you're keeping that distance from the individual. And not only keeping yourself safe, keeping your sellers safe, but keeping all those buyers that could show up safe, because we've seen that happen where there's a crowd outside of a home and chaos ensues. So we want to be careful that your sign isn't out front of a home where something like that happens. Fair?
Yeah, and just on what we're going to send out, please just know that that's just our team policies for you to use to think of your own. Please don't just copy and paste it. If something in ours is illegal or out of policy in your area, we're not liable for that. I just want to put that out there. That this is for you guys to start thinking.
Cool. Thanks, John. Appreciate it. Thanks for sharing. All right, guys, we're gonna transition, and we're gonna spend the next just 10 minutes for the last 10 minutes of our call on a session that I've done for a couple of regions, and I just haven't been able to do it for our group here. And it's this conversation of, well, we've survived. Some of us may not feel that way right now, or we might just, put in parentheses, just barely. But we've survived, and now it's time for us to really think about what do we need to do in our business to make sure that we're getting into this June and July and August month in a very productive way. The reason why I put this together is because this word survive just kept on coming up, right? Like, hey, how are you doing? Well, I'm surviving, I'm surviving, I'm surviving. And what was happening is our agents and sometimes even ourselves, we were going into survival mode, right? We were going into survival mode, and survival mode is a lot different than thrive mode from my perspective. There are 5 things that I want us to think about when it comes to thriving. And I call those the 5 to thrive. The first one is please don't change your goal, right? A lot of us are goal-oriented people. And many of us were in this mindset that, gosh, this was going to be my best year ever. I was on track for my best year ever. My first response to that has been this. Well, it couldn't have been everybody's best year. Like, everybody has said that, and it wasn't going to be everybody's best year. So don't use what's happened in the last 30, 60, 90 days as an excuse to convince yourself that, gosh, that's the only reason why I'm not going to hit my goals, so I might as well change them. Don't use an unexpected challenge as an excuse for you to just not show up one more time. Human beings, we love to rationalize and we love to use or find excuses. So here's my philosophy on don't change the goal, right? My thought process here is this, that the only purpose of our goal is to set the activities necessary to hit those goals. That's what those goals are about, right? It's about setting a goal such that we can look back and say, well, if that's my goal, what do I need to do? John said, well, we did 62, I think it was, open houses in the last 60 days. Well, why? Well, that was because that was the activity needed to add a person to the database every day such that he stayed on track for his goal, right? The only purpose of a goal is to set the activities. So do you think that right now you should reduce your activities in June, July, and August? Well, if you think it's time to reduce activities, then yeah, sure, reduce the goal. But most of us don't believe that. Most of us believe that, gosh, I really need to get back into activity. I need to increase the activity that I was doing. The goal informs the strategy, guys. The strategy informs the activity informs your calendar, and your calendar informs your schedule. That's the purpose of the goal. So don't change the goal. Number 2, win the day, right? Last week, I think it was, we did a whole session on it, so I won't spend a whole lot of time here. But my belief is that every day we need to wake up and make sure that we put ourselves in the path or on a schedule that allows us to win. And I've shared these 3 questions again and again and again. We start our day with, hey, what can I do today? Then what will I do today? Which is 2 very different things. What we can do and what we will do, 2 different things. And then at the end of the day, I ask myself, what did I do today? I write these things down. Guys, I have a 1 sheet, and maybe we can send that out. I think we may have already sent it out last week, that those 5 C's to win the day. I go through those 5 questions to make sure that, hey, are we going to win every single day? Absolutely not. I don't, right? There was a couple days last week that I lost. But I show up each day realizing that I don't have to think about the week. I don't have to think about the month. I don't have to think about my yearly calendar. I have to think about what can I do today, right? What will I do today? And what did I do today? For me, that is winning the day. I share a lot, many times. Most of you have heard this, but Stephen Covey teaches the law, or taught the law of the farm, which says a farmer doesn't get to take days off, right? A farmer doesn't get to go out, plant some seeds and say, you know what, I'll come back in a couple weeks. A farmer doesn't actually get to say, you know what, I'm going to take these 4 days off, but I promise on day 5, I'm going to put in double time. What happens? Well, the crop will die. He will not see a return. But see, we run our businesses, right, I guess like a farmer that isn't a farmer. We run our businesses and say, gosh, I'm going to go all in on Monday, and then Tuesday and Wednesday we just can't do it. And then Thursday we say, well, I'm gonna call 100 people today to make up for the fact that I didn't call 10 or didn't call 10 or didn't call 10. That is not going to work. Right? Stephen Covey says the basic unit of success is the day. It's the law of the farm. Earl Nightingale said that success comes not from sudden, sporadic bursts of activity, but through the cumulative effect of disciplined daily effort. So remember, just win the day. And interestingly enough, it doesn't take a whole day of work to win the day. It just takes a little bit of focused activity, a little bit of focused time. So remember the law of the farm. A farmer doesn't get to get energized at the beginning of the season and stop halfway through. Number 3, the third step to thrive is learn something new. And I believe that it's important for us to learn something new every single day. Here's why. Because learning something new keeps us humble. Learning something new keeps us collaborative. Learning something new helps us to recognize what is valuable to us in building a business. The brokerage business is an interesting business, guys. We truly oftentimes come from a, hey, what did you do for me today mentality? And I'm okay with that, right? I believe that the brokerage is here to constantly nonstop provide value. Gary Keller gave me some good advice, maybe 3.5 years ago. He said, understand what your business's value proposition is and then deliver it every single day. See, if you stop delivering it, people will say, well, I'm not getting the value anymore, and they will leave. And some of us, right, may think about that even today. But I'll tell you, there's no better place to learn something new every single day than right here. Now, it doesn't mean get overwhelmed. It doesn't mean take a class every day. For some, it's just taking some book recommendations or spending 15 or 20 minutes in KW Connect, right? Like, I will guarantee you, learning something new every day will help you to thrive. We will grow whether we like it or not if we're learning something new every day. It is why a day does not go by that I don't read, right? If I'm going to read a book a week, guess what? A day can't go by without me doing that activity. But learning something new has kept me incredibly, it is my intention that it keeps me humble because I realize how much I don't know. Number 4 is play the long game. Play the long game. Guys, too often we get frustrated or we get disappointed in how our month went or how our year is going. if we're going to be in business 3 years from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, and I hope all of us are, then it's important to play the long game. The winner is always the one that sees the future, guys, right? Grandmaster chess players don't see well, this is not me, but they don't see one move ahead, 2 moves ahead, 3 moves ahead. The grandmasters of chess are looking at the board 10 to 12 moves ahead. That blows my mind, and yet they are playing the long game, and that's why they win. The first part of playing the long game is seeing the long game. So reflecting on where you are and where you want to go and understanding the steps that it's going to take to get there, right? Having a coach or a consultant, right, help us with our business is critical for us to play the long game. And number 5, we've talked about this a lot, is be still, right? Be still. You know, I believe that in Ryan Holiday's book, Stillness is the Key, and I've shared that book with a lot of people. He says life is too short to work for any period of time to get to a place where you don't get to do what you want to do. And at times it takes, right, stillness or reflection or a pause or pulling the cord and stopping for us to realize that, hey, we need that white space. We need that time in the morning, or we need that time in the evening, or perhaps you just need that time in the middle of the afternoon to disconnect from the stress of the day or the business or the week. He tells a story in his book of Pan, the Greek god Pan. I've shared this with many of you, so this is a repeat for some of you, but he tells the story of the Greek god Pan. Now, in Greek mythology, Pan possessed a stentorian voice, right? He was just incredibly loud. In fact, the other gods, when they were battling hordes of giants, would call Pan and say, hey, Pan, scream. And Pan would shout, and his overwhelming voice would scare the giants, and they'd run away, and they would win, right? They'd win the battle. By what? Just noise, guys. Well, interestingly enough, our English word panic comes from the name of the ancient Greek god Pan. Stillness is the key, right? So much of what we are dealing with on a daily basis is the noise of the media, or the noise, that really, really loud voice in our head. Maybe it's the really, really loud voice of someone that we're in business with, or we work around, or is a friend of ours, who knows? But Stoic philosophy, and that's Ryan Holiday's book, Stillness is the Key, is based on that. It talks about the dichotomy of control. There's certain things we can control, and there's certain things that we cannot. And we need to disconnect from those that we can't control and focus on what we can control, and make sure that we have stillness, right? Stillness in our work, in our world, in order for us to take that time and be able to move forward. So again, these were my 5, right? My 5 to thrive. Number 1 is don't change your goal, right? Number 2, win the day. Number 3 is learn something new. Number 4, play the long game. And number 5, be still. All right, guys, it is the top of the hour exactly. Thank you for spending some time with us. Please do not forget our message this morning, and in doing and taking action, and stopping your day-to-day to really think about what we all can do individually and collectively. Please get involved as we reach out to each of our offices. If you know that you want to be involved and be part of the committee around change, just reach out to your team leader as well. Would love that. And if you need me, you know where I am. And for those that don't have my cell phone number, it's 503-890-6527. And I mean that. In this time, if you need something, I want to make sure that you know I'm here. I'm typing it into the chat box as well. I want to make sure that all of our agents, should they want that number, they have it. All right, guys, thanks for being part of our brokerage network, and thank you for continuing to show up how you're showing up, and being who you are. Appreciate you guys.